What is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. This is a college football media brand. We are dedicated to everything about all the major games in college football, but we specifically cover Florida, USF in Tampa, USC, and UCLA. All those teams are basically done, but now we still cover the major games. So we're going to cover the conference championship games coming up this weekend. And I'm going to go through them actually relatively quick, but I actually have something that I'd like to do at the end as the case against Florida State for getting into the playoffs. So let's break down those games, those conference championship games. We got a few of them early on Friday. The Conference USA, New Mexico State, Liberty. Liberty's undefeated, and New Mexico State beat an Auburn team in the Plains. So I actually expect Liberty to probably roll in this game, even though New Mexico State will probably make a game of it, but early at least. But I expect Liberty to win. I'm going to say Liberty wins probably like 28 to like 17. And then probably the biggest game of the year, the rematch of the game in October between Washington and Oregon, this time for the Pac-12 championship. You couldn't ask for a better matchup. These two teams are some of the better teams in the country, bar none. Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., both going up for the Heisman Trophy, which they'll both probably be in New York the following week. Both have really good teams overall. They're probably the two best, like, complete teams, I would say, in the country, and maybe Georgia outside of that as well. So those three I view right now as the best three teams in the country. But definitely a matchup. It's essentially a quarterfinal game at this point, and it's a shame that one of these teams might not make the playoff because they both totally deserve to be there. And we'll get into the arguments of why one of those teams might be able to get there over the other. But for this game, let's just assume that Washington probably wins, but I'm not 100% sure because the betting line right now, I believe, is 9, which is ridiculous. I really think there's something that we're not hearing about Michael Penix Jr., that he might be hurt. And that is the case. That's why Vegas feels that Oregon is such a large favorite, because if it's a 3-point game in Washington, in Seattle, why is it that big of a difference on a neutral site? I don't see these teams as being that far off from each other, but obviously Vegas knows more than most of us know. So there must be something there. I don't know. I'm just trying to get to my later segment. Getting through these picks is not really the important part of this show, because I want to get to that part. But I'll just say I'm going to say that Washington probably wins this game, just to assume everything being all equal. I'm going to say Washington wins. Very close game again. I think Washington wins on like a late score again, like last time they played each other. And I like Odunze. I like their running game. I like their defense overall. Their defense has been able to make stops in almost every game they've needed. They've played a lot of close games, which is not a good thing, but they've been able to come out on top on all those games. Can they do it one more time? And I think they can. And I think this game's going to be close, and I think they do it. Okay, moving on. Big 12 championship game on Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific, I believe 12 p.m. Eastern. Oklahoma State going up against Texas. Texas is a one-loss team with a chance to the playoff. I like Texas in this game. Quinn Ewers is back. he had that shoulder injury that kept him out of a game or two, and then he kind of dove back in, struggled a little bit, and then the game after that, he really took off against Texas Tech. So I expect Texas to win this game at least by 2 scores. I'm going to go with like a 10-point win. I'm going to say Texas wins like 40 to like 30 type game. Okay, the MAC, I don't really care about it, but Toledo is a ranked team. So I'm going to say Toledo probably wins this one like 31 to like 24. AAC, SMU going up against Tulane. If this was the 12-team playoff, Tulane actually would have a shot at getting into the playoffs. So next year, this will be an important game. Right now, it's just kind of whatever because Tulane lost to Ole Miss, which they didn't have their starting quarterback Pratt in. And so if he was in, they might have been able to beat Ole Miss. But SMU Tulane, I mean, Tulane's played great all year outside of that loss, and I really expect them to win this game. I think they're a better team than SMU. SMU is a good team. They've racked up points in a lot of their games. But I just like Tulane. It's in New Orleans again, like last year. I think they can beat them. Maybe not convincingly, but at least I think it's probably going to be like a 8-9 point game. I'm going to say Tulane wins like 31 to like 22. SEC championship game, Georgia, Alabama. This game is going to be the contingent on the craziness. Okay. So if Alabama wins this game, you would have 2 one-loss SEC teams with Georgia losing to Alabama, a conference champion, and then Alabama losing to Texas, which potentially could be a conference champion as well. How do you hold out both of them? And I don't know. I mean, it's pretty difficult here to decide on this if Alabama wins, which will be the crux of all the chaos that goes down on Saturday. I think Alabama can win because Kirby Smart has always had a difficult time defending. His defense is having difficulty against mobile quarterbacks. And Milroe is a freak. I mean, he is fast, and his arm is very strong, and he's getting more and more accurate as he's gone on in his career at Alabama. I mean, he was very inaccurate to start, but he's become quite proficient the last several games, especially when they benched him in the USF game. So that kind of worked out very well for Nick Saban, and most people second guess that, but they're a one-loss team with a chance against Georgia to get into the playoffs. So again, this is essentially a quarterfinal as well. So we have 2 quarterfinals in the Pac-12 and the SEC championship games. And I think Georgia wins this one, though. Maybe like a very close one. I'm going to say like a 28-24 game and maybe like a score late. But I do like Alabama's defense, probably more so than Georgia's defense. So if they can get stops on Carson Beck and Georgia's offense, which that has been a difficult task for any defense going up against Georgia, because Georgia is one of the nation's leading teams in converting third downs and as well stopping teams on defense on third down as well. So if Alabama can get a few more stops than Georgia is used to, and maybe forces Georgia to play from behind into the third quarter, and maybe there's more pressure on Carson Beck, maybe he throws a pick or two. I think Georgia does win it, like I said, and I'm going to go with 28-24. And then last 2 of these, Big Ten, this is going to be a layup. I think Michigan's like a 3-score favorite from Vegas. Iowa is a terrible offense. Michigan has a very good defense. They may have like 20 yards of offense the whole game, but Iowa's defense is going to keep them in the game. So this could be a very low scoring game. I'm thinking like a, I don't know, 17-3 game, but Michigan is definitely going to control this game. It may be low scoring, but Michigan's never going to be really in threat of losing. Okay, ACC championship game, Louisville, Florida State. There's a high likelihood that Florida State loses this game. And obviously, it's because of Tate Rodemaker taking over for Jordan Travis, who's out for the year. And Louisville is a team that lost to Pitt, a 3-9 Pitt, and lost to Kentucky last week, a 7-5 Kentucky. And I don't think this Louisville team is that great, and it actually hurts Florida State immensely because they're not an 11-1 team, potentially putting up another quarterfinalist game here as well. So this really hurts Florida State that they lost last week. Plus the fact that Florida State did not look that great against Florida. It was a 2-point game against Florida with 2:48 left. So it wasn't like Florida State stomped Florida. It was a very close game, and Florida was actually leading for the majority of that game. In this game, Louisville all year has been a team of consistent, putting drives together to bludgeon the teams that they go up against. Plummer is sufficient in controlling the offense. Their run game is pretty adequate to above board. Florida State's defense, though, is strong. They played very well against Florida's offense last week, even though Florida had a backup redshirt freshman playing at quarterback. But I don't know. Louisville, I'm not too high on them. I know people think that probably Florida State can lose this game, and I think they can too, but I'm going to go with the fact that I think Florida State's going to win, because if Florida State loses this game, that completely knocks them out. There's no way in hell that they're getting into the playoff if they lose this game. But I think they're going to win this game just because I don't think too highly of Louisville. And but it'll get to my next point, which is the case against Florida State. Okay, so I did a bunch of research. I mean, it's not that difficult. You could just look at team schedules and break down records and stuff. But, the three teams that are likely to replace Florida State. So I'm having it as if Michigan, Washington, and Georgia win. Now, potentially, if Alabama wins, they would replace Georgia there. But as of right now, I'm having it Georgia. So then you would essentially have two other teams with one loss. And it's also dependent on Washington as well, because if Oregon beats Washington, then you have Washington with one loss, Oregon with one loss, and then if Alabama wins, then it's Georgia and Alabama all with one loss. And it's like, how do you decipher between all four of those teams and Texas? But the breakdown, I have those three teams of Oregon, Texas, and Alabama. Oregon has wins against their best wins are Texas Tech, which was an 8-point win against a 6-6 team on the road. A game at Utah, 35-6, which is a stomping. They ended up being an 8-4 team. USC, they beat 36-27. They were 7-5. They had the previous Heisman winner from 2022, Caleb Williams. Oregon State at home, 31-7, which is a stomping. Oregon State went 8-4 and finished number 21 overall. The loss they had was against Washington on the road, 33-36 with a missed last field goal. Washington finished 12-0 and number 3 overall. Their championship game obviously is against Washington, 12-0, number 3. And it also would avenge their only loss if they're to win it. So they have the highest valued championship game if they win that game, which that is a huge factor in deciding who gets to go. Because if they beat Washington, especially if they beat them pretty convincingly, there's almost it's almost guaranteed that they get into the playoff. They only had one score game in their victories, and that was against that Texas Tech team, which was 6-6. Texas, They had a win at Bama, 34-24, 11-1 was Bama, and number 8. So that is by far the best victory out of all of these contenders. Like, it's not even close. And then their other big victories are Kansas 40-14. Kansas was 8-4, unranked. Kansas State 33-30, 8-4, unranked. The loss that they had against Oklahoma, neutral site game, 30-34. They finished 10-2 and number 12. So that is the second best loss of these three teams. Obviously, Florida State didn't lose, so it doesn't matter. But between these three having losses, I mean, there might be something, a factor there, who has the worst loss or the best loss. And then it's also, because Oregon can avenge their loss, it kind of goes in their favor as well. Championship game for them is Oklahoma State, 9-3, number 19 in the country. Oklahoma State had a loss against South Alabama earlier in the year, so it's not the best victory. It's probably the worst championship game opponent that anyone has. So it's not going to really help Texas, and it may even hurt more than anything. They had 3 one-score games outside their loss, with Quinn Ewers getting hurt in one, the Houston game, and he was out with injury in another, and then he came back from injury in the third. So you can see all those one-score games were likely due to the fact that Quinn Ewers being injured was the reason. In those 3 one-score games, the combined record of those teams was 17-19. So not the best record of those teams, so it doesn't look too great. Bama, Ole Miss, their best victory, 24-10 at home. Ole Miss finished 10-2, number 11 overall. They also beat Tennessee 34-20. Tennessee finished 8-4. LSU, they beat 42-28, 9-3 overall record, and number 13 on the year. So they beat all 3 of these teams at home, and their one loss was at home as well against Texas, 24-34. Texas finished 11-1, number 7 overall. So their loss is probably right around very similar into the Oklahoma loss that Texas succumbed to, but the Texas loss was on their home grass, so that actually hurts them immensely because it was a home loss. So you have to take that into account. And speaking of championship game opponents, they have Georgia 12-0, number 1. So clearly, this is the best opponent. I think I'm countering myself here. I forgot that Georgia was number 1, but Oregon's loss was the best overall loss. But Alabama's opponent in the championship game, a 12-0 number 1 team, defending 2-time champion. This is by far the best opponent and by far the best resume patter that anyone could have. So if Alabama is to win, they have a huge leg up over anyone, because you would add Georgia into that list of their 3 victories, which right now those 3 victories are 27 and 9 against the teams they played, and including a 12-1 Georgia. So that's 39 and 10. That's a really good opponent record of 4 victories. And I would be fair to say that if a win against Georgia, that would almost guarantee Bama in as well. So if Bama wins, if Oregon wins, I'm almost assured of that they're guaranteed to get in. And if Texas wins, I would be hard pressed to keep them out as well, because they already beat Bama as well, which would be a conference champion, a 12-1 team. Those victories go a long way, whereas Florida State's only big victory is against a 9-3 LSU team on a neutral site. Let me finish off the Bama stuff real quick. They had 3 one-score games against Arkansas, Auburn, and Texas A&M, and they had a very similar record as to the opponents that Texas had, 17 and 19. So exact same similar record. FSU's case, LSU neutral site, like I said, they won 45-20. They finished number 13 overall. They had another their only solid road game that they played all year was at Clemson. They won 31-24, and Clemson finished 8-4 and unranked. Duke, Duke, they beat 38-20. Duke finished 7-5 and unranked, but their QB was injured in the prior weeks before the game and wasn't 100% in that game. So you kind of have to take that game with a grain of salt. They also beat Miami 27-20 at home, and Miami finished with a 7-5 record. As far as championship game opponent, it's Louisville 10-2, number 15 overall. Louisville lost to 3-9 Pitt and 7-5 Kentucky. So it looks kind of ugly. Both Texas and Florida State are not getting help by their opponents into these games. Louisville with that loss last week really kind of screwed up the resume for Florida State a bit. So, the other thing I was going to mention about Florida State, the two things, the 3 one-score games they had, they ended up 21-15, their opponents. So their close games their opponents looked better than the rest of those other ones outside of Oregon, because Oregon only really had one-score game outside their loss. And then the other thing that I mentioned about Florida State, and I didn't look at the other ones, I just did it real quick before I was finishing up my my research. The other opponents outside of the ones mentioned, the victories that Florida State had, the other 6 conference opponents, they went 25-35. So that's a very terrible record for all those teams. So those easy opponents were not helpful towards their resume. Also, and you have to take this in consideration, their QB is gone for the year. They're playing their backup. He only had 134 yards against a terrible Gator pass defense on Saturday. I mean, I'm not being a dick, Florida State fans. I'm looking at it objectively. I'm breaking it down, looking at it exactly as best I can. The information that I'm looking at, Texas has a better resume, a better win. Oregon can potentially get a better win with beating Washington and avenging their loss. Alabama will have the best win because a neutral site against the number 1 team in the nation, 2-time defending champion. I don't know how you could argue with that in any way, shape, or form. And their loss being against the number 7 team in the nation, potentially even higher in the playoff. So I mean, as of right now, I don't see how, with all that information, you could argue that Florida State deserves it, even if it comes up that Michigan wins, Washington and Georgia, which would eliminate Oregon and Alabama. I still think Texas could get in because of the fact that they beat Alabama is a stronger victory, regardless of what happens. So, it's going to be close if it is Michigan, Washington, Georgia, and the last spot going between Florida State and Texas. It'll be very close. I honestly, that'll be Florida State's best chance. I don't think that's going to happen because I think that Oregon's probably going to beat Washington. And I know I'm countering what my pick was, but it doesn't matter. I'm still thinking about it overall. I think I went with that pick just to make these arguments here, but I think Oregon can win that game. So it's going to be Michigan, Oregon, Georgia probably, And if that's the case, then you have Washington as well. And we didn't even talk about Washington's resume, who has a road victory against USC, victory against Utah, victory against Arizona, which is one of the better teams in the country right now. Oregon State, Washington has a ton of really solid victories, and Oregon. So they have like 5 really good victories against anyone else. It's going to be difficult to take them out. I'm just trying to see here. Um, that's just the case I have. I know Florida State fans are probably going to be mad with me. You know what? Be mad. I'm just being a realist here. They don't deserve it because their resume is not that strong. And then it's also now you have to take into account the fact that they don't have their quarterback. And as much as that sucks to say, no one really wants to see a team with Tate Rodemaker in the playoffs getting smoked by 30 points. That's not what we want. And I'm sorry that that's what's going to happen. But, I don't know. I feel like Florida State, you saw it in Saturday. You really did. They were not good enough in that game to prove that they deserved to be in the playoff. And there is a chance that they could lose against Louisville. I don't think they will. I think they'll beat them. But again, I don't think beating Louisville is going to help their case because Louisville is, a 10-2 team. Again, really, it's going to be down between Texas and Florida State, I believe. And I think Texas can beat Oklahoma State. So it is a chance that, it's going to be between those two. And, if Quinn Ewers is healthy and if he gets through that game healthy, I completely see why they would choose Texas over Florida State. But that is what I feel. I know Florida State fans are going to be mad at me. Whatever, be mad. You know what? It's just the reality of the situation. And I could be wrong. I mean, I'm just going off looking at how it is objectively as I can and giving my opinion. And again, I will also say that coming into next year, we never have this problem because all those teams that I mentioned, they all get in next year. And that will be a thing of beauty because now we'll actually see really good matchups against teams that are like on the verge, on the cusp, instead of like, only 3 of the perennial teams and then like one random team. That seems to be what it's been for the 10 years that the playoff, the 4-team playoff that we know of has been around. So I fully expect things to be completely different come next year. We get home playoff games for teams, which we've never had, which would be the excitement level will be through the roof. The AAC teams or group of 5 teams will have a legitimate shot at getting in. And if they can actually prove themselves, they'll actually be able to. It's a completely different game next year. And it sucks that it's not this year. But again, this is what we have. And this would have been the perfect year to have the 12-team playoff. But oh well, this is what we have, like I said. So last thing I'm going to say just before to wrap it up. So I think Michigan's going to win. I think Oregon's going to win, and I think Oregon's going to get in. I think Georgia's going to win. So that's the 3 teams I have. And I know I'm contradicting myself a little bit earlier. I think it was more trying to just get to the case of who gets in regarding teams if they won the championship game or not. And then lastly, I think, because then you would have, if that is the case of what I would have, Michigan, Oregon, Georgia, you have Washington and Texas that are 2 really good teams that could easily leapfrog Florida State. So it's going to be a very tough decision. This is going to be a very tense Sunday morning come following these games. So I'm going to be live on Sunday. We're going to be up early to do this. We'll review the games and then we'll go into, I'll be broadcasting live as it's on. So look forward to that. Follow us on all the socials For Twitter, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, it is at hater_radio. For Facebook, it is Hater Radio CFB. You can reach me at email, which is haterradio1@gmail.com. Reach us at haterradio.com for articles. I might do an article about the Heisman coming next week, who my choice is, and breaking it down. Besides that, there's not many more shows left of the year or the season. We'll have that show Sunday, and then we'll have a preview show of the playoff games, and then a recap of that, and then a preview of the championship and a recap. So there's like 5 shows left after this. So it's winding down, which is kind of good. I'm ready to take a break, which, it's nice to, be away from it for a little while, but it's been fun. It's been a very unique year. And, I've been glad to be able to cover this, and, fortunate to spend as much time as I can on this year. And I think we're doing really well, and I'm excited for the future of Hater Radio. And, I'm glad Ian's with us as well. So I'll talk to you guys later, and I'll see you Sunday after these games.